Thank you very much, Professor Tanaka, for your kind introduction. First, let me just say happy birthday to this 5th anniversary or 5th round of this SOGO-Bosai seminars. And I'm a bit responsible for this. And also it has also much to do with the question of whether you can really make it happen, which is really a question of implementation. Okay, today's talk is about a very, very small challenge. So small is beautiful, but it may sound a bit that my talk is so big, but I'm not going to brag about it, but I just like to encourage particularly young people to be outside of your own field, your disciplinary area, which I may call a home base or home system, to another system, which could be a real field, or another disciplinary area. You have to meet another types of people and activities there. And we have to combine two things together. It's really part of what we may call implementation challenges, and also what both sides SOGO means to us. And this already was another challenge for me to say, now I have to, my mother tongue is Japanese. So Japanese is my home system, but I'm now being asked to shift to another, rather non-home system, which is I call a away system. But anyway, in many cases we are being forced to say, well, stay here within your rather comfort zone, where we may call it your own disciplinary area, to another area, which is also an interesting area, and you have to take challenges, particularly in the case that we talked about disasters and disaster management, disaster governance, in the true sense of the term, meaning that we really have to make it really happen, not just talk about it, not just theorize it. It's important, but we have to make some small thing a little bit closer to what we may call implementation done. Okay. Having mentioned that, yeah, I should also say thank you also for giving me this wonderful occasion. I am now today a bit formally dressed up, and it looks like my dress, which is not the best one of what I have, but not so bad. I'm happy about in this suit, but the suit also says this guy is very happy being now used by me physically and traveled maybe 1 hour long train distance. Okay, but yeah, I should also know that I don't mean to be today very formal. I would like to be very, very informal. So that's the way I would like to organize today, to talk today's one. Okay, now, first let me just talk about a bit of terminology questions. Systemic, which is now a fancy word, but I would like to examine the meaning of systemic. And it says, well, basically, you can check later. You can share the slides if you wish. Just giving a feeling that it's been used particularly in the area of biology and medicine. And it refers to an effect on the whole of the body. And not just one part of it. And also a systemic problem, you may call it, or systemic change, is a basic one, experienced by the whole of an organization or a country or community, and not just the particular parts of it. Particular part of it is very important, but how they are interrelated and could be, synergetically reproduced and reformed. So this is what systemic means. This offers you some, idea of one community in the center, municipal government of Kyoto, or say some districts of this town, is now being at stake at the risk of COVID-19. And this causes a lot of impacts and lots of interconnections going on, and formalized, institutionalized boundaries being disrupted and broken. So these kinds of reorganization going on. And please take note that we can find different layers of wholenesses. Wholeness as the body, living body. The smallest one could be, for instance, this campus, for instance. And then the campus is in the neighborhood of this entire community. And so go on. Okay, so different layers of wholenesses is the question. But what I would like to take note is that, we should also focus on one of the smallest wholenesses as a small community or small group, which is already under systemic dynamics from inside and outside. And this is my assumption, hopefully working hypothesis, it may work. Even that kind of wholeness as a living body has at least a potential survival and self-organizing capacity, which we may call a small-scale systemic capacity. So let's listen to the voices, the behaviors, knowledge, wisdom behind, dig them up and try to make reuse of those wisdoms hidden, which may help us to talk about a small-scale governance of systemic risks. Otherwise, systemic risks go spread bigger and bigger, and we are so unhappy because we are quite at loss. It's so big. So another important thing when we talk about systemic is a systemic capacity you can find even on a very, very small living body, which could be very close to us. Living real field. So my message is please, particularly young people who are engaged in real fields, please be confident that the areas you're visiting are the areas of lots of systemic capacity wisdoms. You can pick up some of them, and later you can transform some of them to some new types of formalized knowledge and technology, which we may call later pieces of implementation science. Okay, I'm afraid I have already spent a little bit of time, about 10 minutes, before I talk about design of my talk. The way I intend to talk today, maybe I would use another 50 minutes or so, where I would like to have 5-minute pause, break, and then maybe I will have another, 50 minutes stuff to talk about. Then this will give us another, 40 minutes, 50 minutes for discussions. That's the way I design. Okay, first prelude. When SOGO-Bosai got started in 1995, and then community-based humans-focused disaster governance, where I would say systemic thinking and design issues may work. And particularly in terms of perspectives and frameworks and methodology, and perspectives may also include what we may call some worldviews of how we see the world, particularly the conditions where we are suffering all types of disasters in the broadest sense of the term. And those broadened definitions of broadly defined disasters are called by myself persistent disruptive stressors. And based upon my 35-year experience in the real fields, particularly in the town of Chizu, Tottori, and some other reference towns across Japan, I'm now proposing this idea of smart governance under persistent disruptive stressors. This may be one way of reinterpreting what Japanese people call creative machizukuri activities. But I would like to say, call it smart governance under persistent stressors. I will explain it later. And then this will also guide us to another framework which may work. Let's make it a little bit longer span. And let's look at what happened after the Eastern Japan earthquake and stricken communities. There are lots of build back better questions. But my point is to say this is also upgraded to not merely focusing on natural disaster issues, but many other persistent disaster stressors toward sustainable future. What do you mean by sustainability is also a question, and which I would like to say it's for better being. And so you can find a lot of BBBB there. And probably some of you are aware that I've been also doing a lot of methodological development, particularly in terms of developing and redeveloping, revising, and sophisticating and implementing Yonmenkai system method. It's a workshop method, but which works in different ways and also helps us to set up some participatory platform in a dynamic manner. And a methodological challenge I would like to pick up today also, extending systems approach to incorporate more systemic thinking and design. And one step forward to conceptualization of implementation and implementation science. And I dream society has just sort of celebrated its, in a way, 10th, but in a way 20th anniversary. And the next strategic plan has been being almost prepared. One challenge still remains is, what do we mean by implemented science? What it is about and how different it is from policy science. So I would like to pick up with this question if we have some minutes left. Okay. When SOGO-Bosai got started in 1995, immediately after the Kobe earthquake, Great Hanshin earthquake, we are lucky enough to say, before this earthquake happened, decision has been taken and the Ministry of Education had approved setting up of this new type of division added to Disaster Prevention Research Institute, Kyoto University, which was being challenged by the Ministry of Education and particularly also many other academic communities that DPRI needs to be reorganized to bring in new fresh airs into it. Okay. In 1995, our challenge was, and let me put it this way, at that time, things are so systemic, so people, we were not so sure what we are really happening. So the way I put it is a little bit in retrospect. So afterthought. We were not that much, organized. But I think that's basically what we've been trying to do, including you guys who are doing, continuing to do this kind of effort at this moment. maybe on an upscaled level. The first question was, let's say, 3 professors, including myself, and Fujiwara and Kameda sensei, and then later joined by Hayara sensei. We discussed, and then we are joined by many other then younger professors like Tatano sensei, Hatayama sensei, and many others. Okay. We discussed, maybe it's a good idea. First, meet together, we continue. So meeting together is the first important type of thing we should do when we talk about integration, particularly integration in terms of process integration. And then we talked about map out together, and this may include to make roadmaps and mental models, and some also frameworks, perspectives to be shared together, and also develop some common terminologies so that we can understand each other. So perspectives and frameworks, theories and methodology and practices and feedbacks. We discussed a lot. We even sort of specify them. And even we entered into make it happen. So make it happen is another types of integration. For instance, we decided to have a sort of one night stay seminar annually with drinks and cafes and many others, and to come to know each other better, but also come up with some new types of synthetic ideas and thinkings together during that physical stay together in a particular place. And we made it happen. So integration, we've been doing. So 3 types of integrations: integration 1, integration 2, and integration 3. At that time, we also use this type of visual model. Visual, but it's also a conceptual model. What we mean by our cities and communities, but also our cities are living bodies. So how we can understand where we are studying, but where to go more. For instance, this pagoda tells us this way: that's a 5-story pagoda. The foundation is our nature, and then culture and convention comes next, and then some sort of close but more social norms, and also including some institution schemes, and then civil infrastructure, and then land use and built environment, and on top of them, we have our life activities. So we basically think that we are doing our life, but owing very much to the lower layers of conditions. And as you go up, it gets more faster in change, in the speed of change. As you go down, it gets slower. So how to harmonize and synchronize difference in this kind of chronic dynamics is also a question of integration. For instance, some people came from architecture engineering, so maybe 4th layer, and we are more also civil engineers, 3rd layer. But what Kobe earthquake challenges us is to we have to know each other, we have to work together otherwise some challenging issue of redevelopment in some community areas may not work very well. That's just one example. Okay, later we gradually came to learn that processes from integration 1 through 2 to 3 are essential study subjects of SOGO-Bosai. And let me just refer to one of the latest versions of what I call BICO's process model, which is basically used for operating Yon-Mankind system method. I call it YSM, version 2. What's new about this version 2 is that I added particularly the first and second one, be there and enjoy and excite. Meaning that, usually we can't assume that participatory platform is already there. I've been arguing this kind of question with Otwin Ren and Iran Chavez and many others when I was working at IASS. That for instance, IRGC has similar formula or methodology, which they call as an IRGC framework. But they assume that community platform is already there. So you have to start from this, given that. But when you visit the real field and start from almost nothing, people start to think, what should we do? We first know each other better. So we have to understand how to ferment this kind of preliminary process of setting up the stage for people to meet, and then later you go through the remaining process. Well, I don't have to. I should stop here because if I go into details, it could take another 1 hour. But be there is important. Then enjoy and excite. Then you repeat this. You'll find some people wish to stay there again, but maybe they think of making some plan together, particularly collaborative plan. And credibility is also important according to Rowan's model, which is part of this model. But we also find that, if we ask people to trust each other at the beginning, it doesn't work. So it also has to address the question of how eventually, people may come to trust each other. So I would rather replace it with communicative instead of credible. And as you go and wrap up whole the process, and everybody is maybe this is the version 1 to stop. We may call that credibility is there. Okay, and also what I'm also saying that the number 7, which says execution and inaction, may be somewhat different from solution, because you now have to go out of planning and then get it done in the real field. So the real field issue is also here, including also the preliminary process of be there, enjoy, and excite. So those number 1 and number 2 and number 7 are more to do with the question of more systemic and ill-formalized and not so easy to control. And this is a kind of cyclic and spiral process to balance the two conflicting dynamics. Okay, now let me explain community-based humans-focused disaster risk governance. But my message is also here this way. Communities are another source of social innovation and enterprise. And smart governance and the persistent disruptive stressors are drivers. and if people are strategically prepared that way. And some major task takeaways here. In discussing social innovation and enterprise, I propose to turn our attention to communities. And communities should strategically intend to survive a series of persistent dynamics such as disasters, demographic, and other social changes. And given the current ongoing COVID-19 dynamics is a typical and special one. And despite the potentially negative sides of such dynamics, which rather take it rather negative. And of course, the disasters are lots of negative impacts that they are causing. But also, it could also serve as a kind of drivers to, help communities change their areas if they are well prepared and very adaptive enough. Okay, how? I present a new framework for community-based capacity building effort called SMART governance under persistent disruptive stressors. Here, S in capital means small and solid. The M, modest and multiple, and A, anticipatory and adaptive, and R, responsive and risk concerned. That would guide us to transformation. So, some illustrations and evidence. Chizu Town. Here, I'm repeating the same things over and over, but disasters are broadly redefined. First, let's take a sort of, decade-long time scale. And small area scale we respect, such as a village or town community. And persistent disruptive stressors can be natural disasters, coronavirus pandemics, climate change, and demographic changes, social, economic, and administrative changes, and globalization as shock dynamics, which may serve as a potential driving forces for social innovation, enterprise, and transformation. And particularly, so we're also interested in the question of, community-based resilience development, and how to enhance communities' coping capacity is a question towards shared vision and towards a more sustainable community, which has to be discussed and agreed on together by those who are engaged in the particular community sharing this vision, and to be reviewed. Resilience may mean a lot, but here I mean more community resilience and social coherence enhancement and communities' coping capacity is the question. One may think of bouncing back to before the disaster, which may be a more static resilience, whereas more dynamic ones, we think of adapting to a new state, structural change, and transformation. So smart governance and the persistent destructive stressors are addressing the second type of resilience issues. And I've been working in these communities almost 35 years or more, and I'm trying to make it as a kind of evidence-based approach, and theory hypothesized and tested and derived from the real fields, but mostly small. And working and learning together with community people and other participants like academics and experts from different disciplines, and staying there for decades long. Networking with other reference communities And actually, I've been sort of trying to explore more other rural communities. And some are also in the center of Kyoto city, but small communities. One typical important reference area is Iida city. But across Japan, as well as other countries, like South Korea, Indonesia, India, etc. And some generalizations and patterns need to be developed regarding smart governance practices. Okay, I pick up this Chizu. Maybe, hopefully, I will say refer to the second case as I talk about build back better even before disaster. So those are the areas I've been working together, some very intensively, some sometimes. Okay. So anyway, the method I propose is the study community fixed, you keep stationed there, and framing the community with the key notion of persistent disruptive stressors. And make it small and continue, stay there long, evidence-based, and collaborative accumulation of implementation knowledge and wisdom, including narratives, which I'm not so familiar with, but I'm confident this is a missing area which we should explore more. So here, here's the community. I keep station, people come and keep station there, not just 1 year, but say 5 years, 10 years, another 10 years. Okay, different disciplines, different types of experts, and some outsiders. But basically, community people who are motivated are there to take up this kind of challenge. They see, over a long period of time, different types of persistent disruptive stresses like, mega disasters, particularly natural disasters, and social change. Social change may include, let's say, people, communities are forced to, agree on, to decide on whether, their communities could be amalgamated, or they could be dependent. So that condition is forced. This is also part of social exchange, change dynamics. But the more fundamental one is demographic dynamics. Either in terms of you keep losing population, but another way, in some areas, more influx of population there. And also lots of globalizations. More to do with the question of everything is interconnected. Economics, but also socially, technologically, and many others. And now, infectious diseases. Coronavirus is hitting us. So just to give you an idea, say, it's like small, we start small and solid, but the intention is to bring it to transform. We need to be modest and multiple, anticipatory and adaptive, and responsible and risk concerned. I stress we need to be small and solid and modest and multiple, because you can find a lot of people who say, no, it's just too small, could be too exceptional. You should make it bigger, more perfect, ending up with you do nothing. Okay? Instead, you should start with small wholeness, where a lot of interesting hidden knowledge and experience regarding how you can survive, even unknown questions. So we have to listen to the nature and also social environment, also people's collective behaviors. Okay, so it should go back and forth. And it's like, it's like the PDCA cycle spirally growing. Well, cheese, unfortunately, has been losing constantly population And also, aging is also a big issue. And so one may call that, say, even your effort, can you say that, say, you are doing some successful thing there? I would say, on a modest scale, yes. Those areas where people are working together, practicing together, but also with some good working hypothesis there. Without good criteria and hypothesis you set up, even if you get changed, and hopefully in a better way, you can't say that, say, you are improving or you are changing in a sort of, say, favorable way. So you need that kind of, say, criteria and working hypothesis set up. It has 3 stages. The first stage was, 1987 and 1995, where I was invited to work together. And this first, say, decade was the kind of, say, warming up period. And I was asked by the local people to be engaged in some local schooling, seminar activities, and all kinds of things. And this was also the case where I was trying to introduce more other academics and experts to be interested in getting into this community. And there had already been some interesting initiatives and prototypes of smart governance, budding up. That led to this idea of zero to one movement. I will explain what it means later, but this was originally sort of proposed by the citizens group, together with myself and some academics who gave ideas. And also the name itself was something related to my talk on zero to one dynamics. It's the 21st century has to address this question when I was asked to give a speech at the University of Waterloo. And this special type of, say, challenge was introduced from 1995 to 2007. Interesting, this was just the period when SOGO-Bosai started. And the next decade was another higher enhanced level, in a way that, say, the first one was picking up only elementary villages. Some has been existing since almost 300 years. So very fundamental small villages, like point villages. But another challenge was, say, they were asked to, meet together and come up with some unification of different participating communities, elementary communities, merged into a bigger association. It should be as kind of valley-wise district level association. And some did it well, which gave them a good reason to join this. This is a kind of, say, competition. So some, not anyone, any community could join. So that kind of competition was also the idea. So this was a sort of, say, the challenge from the revitalization at the community level, elementary community level, to valley-wise community level. And this ended quite recently, about 4 years ago. Now it's entering into, pro-zero to one movement ages. And I would like to tell you that, say, luckily, we are now seeing some interesting small-scale efforts made by some new people who came into this area and now running a special type of eco-restaurant called the Tarumari. And they are doing a lot of interesting, impacting activity right now. Okay, main outcomes of Zero to One movements are like this: community innovations, proposing, introducing, and nurturing participatory platforms, which I call communicative spaces. It's a participant platform, but it starts from almost nothing and grows as people meet together and do collaboratively. All these efforts go back to expanding and enhancing the capacity of this dynamic participatory platform. And tested institutional models and Zero-One movements designed and established. And findings include the communities need a new process and space to meet small and fresh and agree and implement small social changes. And communicative spaces need also to be open to outside. I'll touch on this question later again. And tool media and methods also developed and refined, like Yonmenkan system has grown that way, one way or another. And yes, and it also helped to document the process of how they discussed, agreed on, and revised their action plans. So it also helped to serve as a kind of documentation media, also media for people to meet together. So it serves to ferment this communicative space. And interesting, more important is local community associations have been formed. So district-wise, they have their own management community association. So this becomes a kind of a stakeholder to negotiate with the city, which was not possible. I should also mention that this is basically, what I should say that about 50 years ago, they had their town office there, a small municipal office there. Then lots of series of community unifications started, so they had to abandon their autonomous bodies. But now, this way, through this Zero-to-One movement, they are sort of virtually recovering, the former governing body. It's like a virtual small municipal office of their own. Maybe, I should not spend too much time here, but so just to give you an idea to say what types of persistent stressors they've been going through. One is population-wise, and environmental and climate change, and mega disaster dynamics, and interconnected world and globalization dynamics, and now COVID-19 pandemics underway. Okay, let me just explain the uniqueness of this Zero-to-One movement. Zero-to-One movement is one way, a special device to help community people, set up a special type of meeting place. So it's a way to help communities establish a new type of dynamic participatory platform, which I call, right side is budding small community annex system, where you can also invite interested researchers and outsiders, which, left side, this is their established community. You may think that, within this established community, people can communicate each other, know each other, and they can also talk about how to change their communities, which is not always the case. They need a special platform or special communicative space where they meet and also to find say, oh, you have another talent this way. Well, we never talked about this kind of thing. Some gender issues have to be changed this way, which cannot be talked about in the old community. So you need this kind of, say, annex community, annex to this old community. And actually, this 0 to 1 movement was a device to strategically introduce and help community people going through this experience. And finally, they end up with setting up this community association, which is also a kind of real output or outcome of this coping capacity trials and communicative space. So what I should address is say, we need two types of systems, particularly if we wish to be engaged in small changes made. Your own home community, but some who are really motivated should have another annex where you can design this type of small change made, and you practice it, and you go back and forth. This kind of effort is very important. And I know that the left side is what we may call a more formalized, established home system or systematized system, whereas right side is more non-systematic, non-formalized, and I would rather say more systemic system. So two systems need to match up better, and particularly for us type who wish to make small change made in terms of doing research. We should have this kind of understanding. Let's say we should have two legs, one here, another here, and we go through this corridor back and forth. I don't have enough time to talk about this environmental issues, but sort of say forestry management and climate change issues are all concerned. And interesting new people who came in through this 0 to 1 movement, which opened up their communities, which were more say closed. Some new people came, and some young females introduced this special type of say kindergarten in the forest, originally from Germany. And this is also attracting a lot of people who wish to come in. And this guy, Chizu Tarumari Eco Restaurant. This is very much related to SDGs issues, but also their activities are attracting a lot of outsiders. They are being invited by Korean people, Chinese people, and Canadian people, many, and they also visiting this place. And now here, climate change suspect heavy rainfall disaster, which happened in Chizu, 2018, July. And this area also got physically damaged so much. And Chizu town was not just an exception. Lots of, say, heavy rainfalls, amounting to 600 millimeters, something like that. So, and this also tells about, sort of say, community self-evacuation rate. Well, we may argue what do you mean by rate, but anyway, this rate was very low, but this community was good in terms of evacuation. They did very creatively. They had agreed to follow their very basic, simple rules. When something happens which is very urgent, decided, judged by some leaders there, then they should evacuate not to the officially designated shelters. Instead, you should go there in their own local, they their own evacuation places. And, but this is also very much dependent on, adaptive way you have to communicate together. So they had this kind of, rule set up, which worked very well. But I have to tell you that this is not because, they did it all of a sudden, but they needed the previous almost 2-decade-long challenges and training to enhance their coping capacity. Not merely looking at natural disaster, but all types of social destructive, persistent disruptive stressors, and demographic issues, and rural decline issues. This helped people to enhance their coping capacity, in an integrative manner, not merely at one particular disaster issue, which helped a lot, and which helped community self-organize and agree on very simple rules to evacuate. And after that, I was invited to, help them review what's wrong, what should be improved by using Yonmenkan system. And ongoing COVID-19 dynamics also, giving a very interesting evidence pieces, so to speak. Tarmari beer and brewery restaurant, they are also suffering a lot. And actually, what's unique about their business is that they don't make use of this sort of mass-produced yeast. Instead, they use their own local bacteria, attracted by this type of, small rice mold bed, which is living always. And so this type of, special type of rice mold bed they use, and they also use this also to make beer and to be fermented. So they make bread, but they also make beer by making use of this rice malt. Their business is a little bit more complicated, but sort of they ask local community, farmers to produce local raw material rice, special type of rice, organic rice, to be used for this type of brewery and beer production. Another is barley, to be used together with hops, so local material. So they are asked to be part of this small circular economy system, and they get some reward there, and it goes back and forth. What's interesting is that before COVID-19, it was looking like this, sort of left side, this malt bed, rice, whereas before and after, they found that this malt bed looks different. And under COVID-19, they found that it's more pure, partly because the environment is cleaner, and no urban activities are so much done, not necessarily within their neighborhood, but in the entire region of Tottori and further broader areas. And I don't have time to go into details, but before and after, their business is now getting bigger by attracting more young people who wish to work there, given this type of situation. Young people's value and work style are getting different, and they offer more vacation time are they, engage in their special type of this eco-friendly production system. And here are some sum up and takeaways. And communities are another source of social innovation and enterprise. And people's coping capacity as dynamic resilience should be highlighted. And we need a good framework. Persistent disruptive stressors is just one example. But anyway, disasters are broadly defined and regarded as innovation drivers. And stay along there. And smart governance works well for this purpose. Now, how to design communicative space? This is a dynamic, synergetic participant platform. This is really a very interesting theme to study. There are some real evidence. So I really encourage people to study this type of participative platform. And it's also one way to encourage social innovation enterprise to take place. Okay, I will try to make the remaining parts within 15 minutes. So the next term question is build back better even before disasters, which might be titled BBBB. And build back better is a famous slogan, an agenda proposed by the Sendai framework after the Eastern Japan earthquake. But the problem I find about this is that, it doesn't so much connect explicitly to other types of disasters, which I call, for instance, demographic factors, demographic dynamics, or social changes, and also sometimes globalization dynamics, or even COVID-19 issues. So we may need a little bit more, broader definition of what we mean by disaster. So build back better should also mean not just simply from the past natural disaster, but to get it better for what? We should aim at more, sustainable issues. And also, for this purpose, how we can strategically enhance coping capacity of the particular community has to be better exemplified. I'm afraid that so far not enough list of successful, I wouldn't say successful, but vital practices which may help us think about build back better has not been well developed. So we could contribute more. But also this way, to incorporate with the idea of smart governance and the persistent stressors. So focus on small community and keep stationed there. And over a long period of time, you'll see a series of build back better even before disaster, then another BBBB. And how to cope with this effectively, smart governance type of things might be effective. But we also need to check it. To extend the time span, the decade-long ones. So it's not just 5-year period. It should be more 10 years, or another 10 years, another 10 years, another 10 years. Now, if you think this way, what the purpose of doing? After you survive, if you are not happy being there, it's pointless. So it should include more strategic development, sustainable development goals issues. One may argue that it's a little bit too politically set up. I agree, but it still it deserves enough attention. What is meant by really sustainable development goals is very important. But how to make it really happen, how you can do it, and for what period of time, and who are there, what kind of scheme. We have to address these issues. And sustainable development goals may offer us a good criteria with which we can talk about these kind of things. So build back better even before disasters for sustainable communities. And I should note that sustainability is almost equal to well-being. A lot of people are now mentioning this. Welsh government in the United Kingdom, they propose this idea of sustainability as well-being, and many others. So to make it relatively well-being, meaning to say better being. So better being, if you add two more B's, so many B's. BBBB. Okay. For the sake of time, I just go quickly. I've been doing a lot of comparative study between Iida city and also Chizu. And here's Iida city and TENRYU River Basin. So those regions have been suffering lots of natural disasters, as well as social innovations and demographic factors. So beautiful area to check how it works, how they've been doing. And in summary, I think they've been doing, quite cleverly, this type of, BBBB. They are quite implicitly oriented at, sustainability issues. For instance, during the whole process, gender issues have been better made, participation has been strategically better made. Here, then another community, water, poor issues. Yeah, lots of interesting pieces of evidence you can pick up. So, and as you may be aware, that the Iida city suffered from an extraordinarily large fire disaster immediately after the Second War, the end of the war, and almost all part of the central town of Iida got devastated, went into ashes. But they made it extraordinarily well in terms of changing it in a totally different structure physically, but also social innovations and schemes and the people's attitudes toward maintaining, for instance, they have developed a special type of, broad avenue, fire aversive, but this special type of avenue was lined by apple trees. But how to maintain these apples? The then kids in the nearby elementary school, they proposed this idea of me, you, and the next generation, we will take care of these apples. This still remains. Just one example, but lots of social innovations together with physical changes, all kinds of things. I also visited this Iida, but also more local areas, further down the famous river TENRYU. And they've been also doing a lot of social innovations through big flood disasters. One of the typical ones, 1961's big heavy rainfall disaster that devastated the entire river basin area. But they did marvelously in terms of transforming their communities. They had been suffering a lot of problems, how to switch from for instance, the local logging industry not anymore working to what? Or agricultural reforms to what? All are well done. Of course, lots of problems. thanks to small town hall meeting places, or kominkan they call it. They have their special participatory facilities where they meet together, discuss how to make small changes made. It's like a 0 to 1 movement platform. So this is just to give you an idea. Just I don't explain details. Just believe me, that's right. Okay, lots of agricultural reform dynamics were done through different types of flood-related activities, how to recover and how to restructure the industries, given this seemingly very sad event. This is just one way of comparing what has been the case. In Chizu and Nagano, we're checking different types of persistent disruptive stressors, how they change their communities and how they contribute to, in a way, increasing the level of sustainable development goals. Methodological challenge. I propose, let's say, systems approach is working very well, particularly social systems we should have a more focus on. And a systems approach, also two things. One is, we see lots of, interrelated issues as systems, but also process through which you make small changes made or plans to be designed and implemented. This whole process needs to be designed by way of using the idea of systems approach. But it seems that, now, if you wish to address more the practice that have to be done in the real fields, what you can plan within your brainstorming framework, it stops just short of implementing it. So we have to accept that when you go out of brainstorming type of planning, systems analysis, to the real field, more systemic environment designing process, it's a challenge. But we have to understand that, one way, more formalized systems, another is more systemic system, and two need to be connected. And it might be nice if you can develop some corridor and some communicative space as a platform where people can meet together, and even some outside people can be there. Now, this kind of scheme is very, very important. And this is what I call systemic thinking and design. So it's like a home system, like a systematic system, but we also need to go outside and to reach more uncontrollable systemic system, which I may call a away system. And as a implementation-oriented person or SOGO-Bosai experts, they may somehow go out of their home system to reach another neighboring, somewhat systemic system. And then how you can get that, experience back to your home system, it's also a part of what SOGO-Bosai has to pursue. Well, I just know that, regarding systemic risk perspective and other kind of things, there are lots of, research efforts which have already been published, for instance, Otto in Ren and some others. But what I'm saying is that, we call it systemic risk, but we are quite at a loss how we can cope with it. So let's make it small, small, small. And small wholeness is the place. It could still also a very systemic system. We can come outside our home system to reach there and connect to make it a little more SOGO-Bosai oriented. One step forward is the question how to reach implementation. Well, integration is a train of efforts and actors. But some may think that say, well, it looks like you are very close, but when you start to go outside to reach implementation, it's like an endless valley. That's one way to understand. It's a hopeless ending valley. You want to narrow this space, then another space goes out or expanded. So it's a totally endless approach. There could be some areas where this kind of argument may work, but I would also think that there are lots of cases where it's like this. This side, another side, they need to meet together, but there is some gap, which I call an implementation gap. So lots of noises, which make our way of thinking, and sometimes the path of presentation changed. But anyway, so this kind of how to bridge two sides together is also very much path dependent, and there's a lot of complexity there, and it's sometimes not simply. It looks like small, but eventually it turns out to be very big. But Robert Goebel of Clark University and myself are now proposing we should target more at what we may call an implementation gap. That's one way to approach what may be eventually defined as implementation science. So it's like plan and practice. And this kind of model I proposed way back. This is a new one, but anyway, and mutual approaching. And we need this kind of scaffold. But this scaffold could be a meeting place and a communicative space, it may turn out. And eventually it's just not a sort of tentative scaffold, but it should serve as another interactive communicative space. This kind of implementation gap filling effort might work. Here's a producer and customer, they need to meet together, the same thing goes. Okay, it's a mutual bridge making effort, but during the whole process, you need some communicative space to be developed. Seemingly, first as a tentative scaffold, but scaffold may turn out to be a communicative space. So another small piece of auxiliary science outcome. And linguistically, implementation means implementation means to fill, and in means in. So, but where to and which someone and something unknown. So we have to find out the whole process, where to put in, and who are there, and what kinds of things have to be set up there. Okay, similar kinds of approach you can bring in. So this is just one way. And the last iDream conference, myself and Robert Goebel made us a collaborative presentation about bringing the idea of vigilance. One way to approach what is now called evacuation drills efforts. But this may be another way to look at what's missing. But also it helps us discuss communicative space issues and coping capacity issues. I just skip. Methodologically, some of the audience may immediately associate the above Biko's model with Yon-main system method, which has actually been developed that way. I skip, but we have found that this approach has been made use of when the Kyoto University organized a special type of, summer design school, where we invited local citizens living in Nakagyo ward, doing a lot of excellent, autonomous activities for disaster reduction at citizen level, they were still having a problem of failing to include some important key persons. There is a local university, Hanazono University, and Hanazono University is missing as just like a vacuum point. So how to get these kinds of people engaged? Yeah, actually, Shuhachi, neighborhood. But they miss this Hanazono University. It's a vacant place. So in the event of some big disaster happen, without gaining access to this vacuum point, your effort may be not effective. So the question is how to get these guys involved. And this, this kind of because model was introduced and Yonmenkan system was introduced. We did our best, although we didn't get any award. It takes time. It takes time. Okay. And the issues of implementation, lots of things. The implementation gap and communicative space. Actually, communicative space is very important. For instance, people say PDCA cycle. Oh, it's very obvious. But why you have to tell me? It's an obvious thing. But what's important to say, this persistent PDCA cycle is not actually actualizing, because planner is here, doer is here, checker is here, and action, feedback people are there. So they don't meet together. So how you can get these three all types of stakeholders be there, and sometimes this guy is taking more initiative, another guy this kind of orchestrating kind of thing. We really need some special type of communicative space. Even it's a very small thing, that's fine. So this is also kind of very interesting theme to address the implementation gap issues. Okay, finally, I'm afraid to say not many people can understand this. Oh, maybe many people can understand, some don't. And Terada Torahiko, a famous physicist, and also he is a famous physicist, but concerned so much about earthquakes in those days, in the Meiji period and also Taisho period. And he was the person, he left a famous saying, disasters happen when we are almost forgotten about it. So that's what he said as a physician, a physicist. But he also left this interesting remarks. 日常生活の世界とシーカの世界の境界はただ一枚のガラス板で仕切られている。でこのガラスは初めから曇っていることもある。生活の世界の塵に汚れて曇っていることもある。二つの世界の間の通路としてはただ小さな狭い穴があると。でもこれ通ってるとだんだん大きくなると。初めからこの穴の存在を知らないか、また知っているにしてもそれを探そうとしない人もたくさんいるんやと。でもやってるとこれ通れるようになると。天の炎を取ってきてこの教会のガラス板をすっかり、溶かしてしまう人もある。このガラス板っていうのは今アクリル板でちょっと言ってこれは二重三次に意味深なんですが、Let me put it into this way. The final ending remark. Terada Torahiko, a very famous scientist, but he was also quite an excellent haiku poet. So he understands art very well. This offers him a good chance to appreciate what nature is about. Yeah. So physician, he can understand, physicist, he can understand what nature is about, but also another way to appreciate is poems and arts, songs. He was doing such an excellent job in producing special type of haiku journal. And he left this kind of remarks. He said, this green side, that's where his expertise work. natural scientist world. But he also needs to move to another world, another cosmos, which is more systemic. He doesn't use this term systemic, but it's more sort of say, cloudy. Lots of clouds there and shaky. And also, this you are sort of say, well, there is a kind of barrier in between. That's a glass wall. To some good eye peoples, they can look through it. But not many people can look through this. But behind this, there is this wonderful another cosmos. And you need to go sometimes from, making a small corridor to this and stay there and then come back. Going back and forth, you can make this corridor bigger. Now, otherwise, you just keep stationed there. It's what does matter is whether you can understand this seemingly, covered glass wall, but you can go through it and communicate together. That makes your whole life much, much abundant. That's what he said. Having mentioned that, thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.